A familiar product vanishes from store shelves. Then another. Suddenly, factories in Michigan, dairy farms in Wisconsin, and vineyards in California begin closing. No warning, no headlines. But here's the twist. It's not China, not inflation, not even AI to blame. It's Canada. Yes, our northern neighbor has quietly blocked, banned, or boycotted a wave of American goods, and the fallout is already hitting specific US states hard. So why did they do it? Which products are gone? And is your state next in line to lose jobs and millions in exports? Let's break down the 10 US products Canada just rejected, and the silent economic war that's exploding across the border. Number 10. American distilled spirits. Jack Daniel's is disappearing from Canadian bars. Jim Beam bottles are collecting dust. And distilleries in Tennessee and Kentucky are laying off workers faster than they can bottle bourbon. Why? In early 2025, Canada didn't just raise tariffs, they erased American whiskey and bourbon from liquor shelves in Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. A direct hit driven by rising nationalism and political retaliation. And US producers weren't ready. Tens of millions in exports, gone overnight. Local economies are now facing a dry future, and it's just the beginning. Number 9. American wine and beer. Napa Valley Reds, gone. Oregon IPAs, pulled from shelves. In 2025, Canada quietly stopped stocking American wine and beer. No press conference, no warning. Just gone. Liquor boards in provinces like British Columbia and Quebec replaced US imports with Canadian-only labels, part of a growing buy local movement fueled by rising nationalism and trade tensions. The result? California vineyards, Oregon breweries, and Washington wineries are bleeding revenue. Over 85% of their international alcohol market vanished. Wineries are laying off workers. Breweries are canceling shipments. Entire regions built on wine exports are now scrambling to find new buyers. And here's the brutal truth. This isn't just about wine and beer. It's a warning. Because if Canada can quietly erase one US industry with the stroke of a pen and the silence of a boycott, who's next? Is your state ready to lose its biggest export overnight? Number 8. Netflix subscriptions. Canada cancels back. Netflix is bleeding subscribers in Canada, and it's not just about rising prices. In 2025, Canadians began canceling Netflix in droves, protesting the platform's refusal to follow new Canadian streaming laws. These laws require platforms to fund and promote local content, support Canadian voices, not just Hollywood hits. While others adapted, Netflix pushed back. And Canadians pushed back harder. The result? A national boycott. Hashtags like #CancelNetflix Canada trended for weeks. Influencers, politicians, and media figures all called for change. And it worked. Netflix lost thousands of Canadian subscribers, pausing local productions and cutting investments. California's tech sector, where Netflix is based, felt the hit too. Revenue dropped, projects were shelved, and studios began laying off staff tied to Canadian shows. Meanwhile, Canadian platforms like Crave and CBC Gem gained serious ground. They're promoting homegrown talent and picking up viewers Netflix lost. And here's the bigger issue. If Canada can cancel Netflix, who's next? What happens when countries like Germany, Brazil, or India demand the same? This isn't just a content dispute. It's a warning shot, a reminder that American digital giants are no longer untouchable. Number 7. Disney Plus memberships. Disney's magic is fading, and not in a fairy tale way. In Canada, particularly in provinces like Alberta, Ontario, and Nova Scotia, Disney Plus is bleeding subscribers at a rate the company didn't expect. On the surface, it looks like just another case of rising prices turning off users. But the truth cuts deeper. For many Canadians, the final straw was Disney's unwillingness to embrace and invest in local culture. While the Canadian government passed new regulations requiring streaming platforms to support domestic content creation, Disney pushed back, delivering little in the way of Canadian stories, voices, or representation. That decision sparked outrage. A grassroots boycott movement ignited online, accusing Disney of cultural exploitation, profiting off Canadian viewers while giving almost nothing back. The financial blow was swift. Subscriptions dropped. Marketing budgets were frozen. Original productions scheduled for Canadian locations were quietly cancelled. And back in Burbank, California, layoffs began in departments tied to international streaming operations. This isn't just a business stumble, it's a cultural warning shot. If a global juggernaut like Disney can't withstand a national push for content sovereignty, what does that mean for other US-based tech and entertainment giants? The era of unchecked digital dominance may be ending, and for Silicon Valley, the Disney Plus fallout is a loud, clear alarm bell. Number 6. Spotify Premium, silenced in Canada. Spotify, the world's biggest music streaming platform, is suddenly going quiet north of the border. In 2025, thousands of Canadians began cancelling their Spotify Premium accounts. What looked like a minor dip in subscriptions at first quickly snowballed into a full-on revolt. And it wasn't just passive cancellations. Local Canadian artists, many of them independent and rising, began actively pulling their music from the platform. Why? Because Spotify refused to do one simple thing: prominently highlight Canadian voices. This all came to a head when Canadian regulators introduced new streaming rules, urging platforms like Spotify to promote local content in curated playlists and algorithm-driven suggestions. These weren't restrictions, they were opportunities. A chance to support homegrown talent. But Spotify hesitated. For months, it delayed compliance, lobbied for exceptions, and continued business as usual. That misstep sparked a cultural backlash. What followed was swift, loud, and deeply Canadian. Grassroots campaigns swept across social media, urging users to cancel Spotify Premium and switch to platforms that actually prioritize Canadian music, services like Stingray, which offers curated Canadian playlists, or Bandcamp, where fans can directly support local artists. Even French-speaking artists in Quebec joined in, accusing Spotify of marginalizing francophone content in favor of algorithm-friendly Anglo-American pop. For Spotify, the consequences have been brutal. Ad revenue is collapsing, as Canadian brands pull marketing dollars from a platform now seen as tone-deaf. Partnerships with local festivals and labels have been severed. And the impact isn't just felt in Toronto or Vancouver, it's echoing all the way to New York City, where Spotify's North American headquarters are watching Canadian losses eat into the North American bottom line. Entire departments focused on user growth, advertising, and partnerships are now facing budget freezes. Spotify's once stable grip on the global streaming market is cracking, not because of a competitor's innovation, but because of its own cultural blind spot. And the bigger question now looms. If Spotify, arguably the most adaptive, data-driven music platform on Earth, can't figure out how to respect and reflect the identity of a nation like Canada, can any US-based digital service truly thrive in a world demanding cultural equity? Spotify isn't just losing subscribers. It's losing trust. And in today's world, that's far more dangerous. Number 5. US Apple shipments, rotting at the border. The iconic red apple, once a proud symbol of American agriculture, is now piling up in warehouses, softening in crates, and rotting at the US-Canada border. Washington State, Michigan, and New York used to count on Canada as one of their biggest buyers. For decades, Canadian grocery stores stocked American apples by the ton: Gala, Fuji, Honeycrisp, Red Delicious. But not anymore. In 2025, everything changed. Canada introduced a wave of new food safety regulations and country of origin labeling laws. On the surface, they were about transparency and consumer protection. But in practice, these rules acted like trade walls, subtle, silent, and devastating. Suddenly, anything labeled "Product of USA" was pushed to the back of the shelf, or off the shelves entirely. Then came the "Buy Local, Eat Local" movement, which spread across provinces like wildfire. Backed by Canadian farmers and supported by government incentives, the campaign urged citizens to skip imported produce in favor of Canadian-grown fruit. The result? American apple exports collapsed. Shipments that used to move across the border in hours now sit idle for days, blocked by red tape or outright rejected. Supermarket chains across Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia are replacing American apples with Canadian alternatives, or avoiding apples altogether in favor of local berries and stone fruit. For American farmers, the impact is catastrophic. Thousands of pounds of apples are being dumped. Cold storage facilities are maxed out. Trucks are being turned around empty. Small orchards, some family-run for generations, are now laying off seasonal workers, slashing harvests, or shutting down entirely. And here's the brutal truth. This isn't just about apples. It's a warning shot for the entire US agricultural industry. If Canada can cripple one crop with a few new rules and a shift in public sentiment, what's next? Pears from Oregon, lettuce from California, corn from Iowa. Every farmer, trucker, packer, and grocer tied to cross-border trade is now on edge. Because in this new era of quiet economic warfare, your fruit might not just spoil on the shelf, it might be erased from the market altogether. And the people who grow it, they're running out of time. Number 4. Philadelphia cream cheese, melting off Canadian shelves. Full segment script, long version. For decades, Philadelphia cream cheese was a quiet staple in millions of Canadian homes. It sat proudly in kitchen fridges from British Columbia to Newfoundland, spread across morning bagels, folded into dips, and blended into luxurious cheesecakes. It was a small, creamy symbol of the long-standing friendship between Canada and the US, but in 2025, that friendship is curdling. What began as a trade dispute is now a slow-moving economic divorce, and this time, even cream cheese isn't safe. The backlash begins. Philadelphia cream cheese is owned by Kraft Heinz, a US food giant with major production facilities in Pennsylvania and Ohio. For years, the brand thrived in Canada, facing little competition and enjoying high visibility in every major grocery chain. Then came the tipping point. Canadian dairy farmers, already struggling under rising production costs and environmental regulations, raised an alarm. They claimed that US dairy products, especially Philadelphia, were flooding Canadian shelves at unfairly low prices, thanks to massive subsidies from the American government. And they weren't wrong. In Washington, lawmakers had quietly expanded dairy supports, billions of dollars in price supports, insurance, and export incentives. These policies allowed US companies to undercut local producers across borders. Canadians began asking, why are we buying subsidized US dairy while Canadian farms closed down? The social media storm. The outrage didn't stay on farms. It hit social media with full force. Canadian food bloggers, influencers, and even celebrity chefs began promoting "Ditch Philly, Support Local" campaigns. Viral videos exposed how much US dairy dominated their shelves. TikToks compared locally made alternatives. Some posts racked up millions of views, turning breakfast tables into battlegrounds. Suddenly, Philadelphia cream cheese wasn't just cream cheese, it was a symbol of economic imbalance, of exploitation, of cultural disregard, and Canadians responded. The economic fallout. Sales dropped 18% in under 6 months. Canadian grocery chains reduced stock. Some chains replaced Philadelphia with homegrown brands entirely. In the US, the impact was swift. In Pennsylvania and Ohio, factory managers reported layoffs. Production lines slowed. Supplier contracts were cancelled. Even local dairy farmers, who sold raw milk to Kraft Heinz, began feeling the pain. It wasn't just a consumer protest. It was a full-scale economic ripple. Kraft Heinz's Canadian distribution wing reported a multi-million-dollar hit. Internal memos leaked to the press warned of permanent brand damage north of the border. This wasn't just about cream cheese. It was a lesson in modern trade warfare, quiet, cultural, and devastatingly effective. A bigger pattern. Philadelphia isn't alone. This boycott is part of a much larger movement in Canada. One that's hitting US exports in unexpected ways. Netflix and Disney Plus are bleeding subscribers. American wines and beers are being pulled from liquor shelves. Spotify is losing ad dollars and artists. Even apples from Washington state are rotting at the border. One after another, industries are learning a hard truth. Canada isn't afraid to close the door. And this isn't about nationalism or isolationism. It's about economic self-respect. For decades, the US dominated Canadian markets without much resistance. But now, Canadians are reasserting control over what they consume, who profits, and how trade impacts their communities. The takeaway. Philadelphia cream cheese is still on some Canadian shelves, but for how long? If a product as harmless and familiar as cream cheese can be targeted, boycotted, and nearly erased from a major foreign market, then no US brand is safe from the next wave of trade retaliation. So the question is no longer, will this happen again? It's, which American product is next? Because when trade wars go cold, the real damage isn't done in headlines, it's done in grocery aisles, paychecks, and disappearing jobs. And this quiet war, it's just getting started. Number 3. Hellmann's mayonnaise. How a sandwich staple became a symbol of resistance. For most of us, mayonnaise is just mayonnaise. A creamy white spread we slather on sandwiches, mix into salads, or swirl into dips. But in 2025 Canada, even mayo has become political. Hellmann's, an iconic brand found in millions of fridges around the world, is being forced off Canadian shelves. Not because of taste, not because of quality, but because of what it represents in a brewing economic standoff between Canada and the United States. The origin of the backlash. Hellmann's is owned by multinational giant Unilever. In North America, it's primarily produced in New York and Illinois, and for decades, it held a loyal customer base in Canada. But that loyalty has vanished almost overnight. At the heart of the issue, U.S. agricultural subsidies. Hellmann's uses key ingredients like soybean oil and eggs, both of which are heavily subsidized by the U.S. government. That means American producers can sell them below true market value, undercutting Canadian farmers who receive little to no such support. This isn't a new problem, but 2025 brought a breaking point. When Canada began ramping up its Buy Local initiative, Hellmann's became a visible target, a household symbol of foreign dependence. Social media turns up the heat. It didn't take long for social media to explode. On TikTok, a viral challenge called #MayoCheck swept through Canadian kitchens. Users flipped their jars to check for labels. United States, made in the USA, right pointing arrow thumbs down maple leaf, Canadian produced, right pointing arrow thumbs up. Thousands began tossing out Hellmann's and replacing it with local brands like President's Choice, Neal Brothers, or even homemade alternatives. Food bloggers created side-by-side taste tests. Chefs began showing how to make mayo from scratch. Influencers tied the movement to national pride, food sustainability, and economic justice. It worked. Sales dropped 15% in Q1 alone. But the damage didn't stop at the cash register. Economic shockwaves. Hellmann's supply chain is complex and deeply tied to U.S. infrastructure. When Canadian orders declined, egg producers in the Midwest saw a drop in demand. So did soybean processors, oil suppliers, and logistics companies handling cross-border freight. In New York, a distribution center that handled Canadian shipments cut shifts by 20%. In Illinois, suppliers to Unilever's production plant reported layoffs. What started as a hashtag turned into real-world job losses. This wasn't just about a condiment, it was a chain reaction. One that exposed just how reliant certain American industries are on Canadian consumers. A wider trend. Hellmann's isn't the only product caught in the storm. It's just another example of a broader Canadian shift. Philadelphia cream cheese is vanishing from grocery aisles. Spotify is losing ad revenue and Canadian subscribers. US apples are rotting in storage warehouses. Even bourbon is being pulled from liquor stores in provinces like Ontario and Quebec. One after another, American brands are learning the same hard truth. If you're not contributing to Canada's economy, you're vulnerable. Why now? So what changed? Why is Canada suddenly pushing back? Two big reasons. Economic nationalism is on the rise. Canadians, like many others around the world, are choosing to support homegrown industries, especially in food and tech. Frustration over trade imbalance. Canada has watched US subsidies distort markets for years. But now, with inflation, global instability, and the public more aware than ever, the patience has run out. And Hellmann's. It just happened to be in the crosshairs. The takeaway. Hellmann's may still be on the shelves in parts of Canada, for now. But it's shrinking. Quietly, steadily, one jar at a time. This is more than a boycott. It's a warning shot to US brands. If you rely on Canadian money, you better respect Canadian farmers. If you flood markets with subsidized goods, expect pushback. And if you think a loyal customer can't walk away, think again. Because this isn't just about mayonnaise. It's about sovereignty, survival, and standing up to a trade system that, for many Canadians, has felt rigged for far too long. One Americano coffee, when a cup of coffee became a statement. It started with a name change on a chalkboard. At a trendy cafe in Toronto, the morning special no longer read Americano. Instead, it was listed as a Canadiano. At first, most customers thought it was just clever marketing, a patriotic twist. But the truth ran far deeper. This wasn't just a new menu item. It was a quiet act of rebellion, a symbol in a cup. For decades, the Americano has been a cafe staple across Canada, a bold espresso diluted with hot water, simple and strong. The name itself has a bit of history, tracing back to World War II, when American soldiers in Europe would water down espresso to suit their palates. But in 2025, the word Americano now feels loaded. As tensions rise between Canada and the US over trade, tariffs, and agricultural policy, a growing number of Canadians are rejecting anything that symbolizes American dominance. And coffee, that's a powerful place to start. The Canadiano movement, what began as a fringe idea, renaming the Americano, has evolved into a nationwide movement. Cafes in Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, and Halifax have all joined in. Some offer tongue-in-cheek signage like, hot beverage, made with 100% Canadian roast. Hot beverage, no American beans were harmed in the making of this drink. But behind the jokes is a serious economic shift. Canadian coffee roasters are cutting ties with US bean suppliers. Instead, they're turning to direct trade with Central and South American farms, or supporting domestic roasting collectives that bypass US intermediaries entirely. Economic fallout south of the border. The impact in the US has been swift and sharp. Downward trend exporters in California, Washington, and Oregon are reporting millions in lost orders. Downward trend roasting facilities that depended on Canadian distribution have seen contracts cancelled or renegotiated. Downward trend independent US growers, especially in Hawaii, are losing their foothold in what used to be a friendly northern market. In some cases, long-term partnerships that lasted for over a decade have unraveled in weeks. One Seattle-based exporter told reporters, "We've gone from shipping weekly to completely idle. Our Canadian partners won't even return calls." Why coffee? Why now? There are two big reasons the humble Americano became ground zero in this trade protest. 1. Daily visibility. Coffee is personal. It's ritual. And in Canada, where millions grab their morning cup from local cafes, it's a space where politics quietly enters the mainstream. Every renamed drink becomes a reminder that trade isn't just policy, it's part of your routine. 2. A newfound national pride in roasting. Canada's coffee culture has matured dramatically in recent years. Homegrown roasters like Detour, Pilot, and 49th Parallel are gaining global attention. The movement isn't just anti-American, it's pro-Canadian craftsmanship. And with the government quietly backing Made in Canada food and beverage campaigns, the shift is accelerating. The ripple effect. Beyond lost bean sales, the backlash affects logistics companies that transported green beans across the US-Canada border. Food service distributors with US sourcing deals. Cafe chains with American parent companies, now facing local pressure to localize their menus. The renaming of the Americano may seem symbolic, but symbols are powerful. They rally movements. They influence buying decisions. They shape the conversation. And that's exactly what's happening here. The takeaway. A year ago, no one could have imagined a morning coffee becoming a battleground in a trade war. But now, one renamed beverage is telling a much larger story. In the face of US agricultural dominance, Canadian businesses, large and small, are drawing a line. And with every sip of a Canadiano, Canadians are reminding the world, we can roast our own. We can name our own. We can stand on our own. This isn't just about coffee. It's about identity, independence, and taking back control, one cup at a time.